And we are back once again with news and views. Thank you for staying tuned to Salam Media with me, Pagamile Hlubi Majola. We are going straight into our next segment where we are going to talk about Donald Trump's latest playbook. First of all, I know many of you are aware, obviously, that the United States government unlawfully invaded Venezuela, kidnapped its president and the first lady, and is holding them unlawfully in a prison in New York, having charged them with domestic US crimes. I mean, the whole thing sounds like a script from a movie, but it's actually happening in real life. And now it seems that the United States has its focus not just on Iran, but also on Cuba. And to help us unpack this in more detail is Professor Patrick Bond, who is a distinguished professor of sociology, and he's also a political economist and political ecologist and scholar of social mobilization at the University of Johannesburg. I think he's at the University of Johannesburg. Patrick, you will correct me. Good morning. How are you?
It's wonderful to be back with you, Amelia. I saw you at the protest at the US consulate a few weeks ago. NUMSA put on an important
Can
show.
we talk about what is happening with Cuba? Because we've been hearing some saber rattling from the United States, from Donald Trump in particular, where they are really intensifying the sanctions there. What is going on? Bring our listeners into the picture.
Well, I think we go back to 1959. That's when Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and the small group of guerrillas succeeded with a revolution against Batista, the US puppet dictator of Cuba. And then until Castro left power in the late 2000s, and was succeeded by his brother Raul, who's now 94 years old, and whose grandson is now an important figure. Raulito is his name. But in that period, the US tried to kill Fidel Castro at least 17 times, documented. The CIA tried and tried again and failed, and then put an embargo. And the reason was simple, was that this was an example of a successful communist society that was supported at the time before 1991 by the Soviet Union. And then after 1998, after a period of tough adaptation to the crash of the Soviet Union, Venezuela came forward, especially with the government of Hugo Chavez, which supplied oil and funding and kept really Cuba going. And that continued until the January 3rd. That was the day this year that the US had kidnapped Nicolas Maduro and his wife and basically made his successor, Delcy Rodriguez, more of a puppet. And that meant an immediate cut for the oil supplies that went to Cuba. And now Cuba is facing, now in late February, a massive crisis. Trump has also bullied the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, to cut the oil. So it's only really going to be potentially Russia trying with its shadow fleet to keep the energy supply coming to Cuba. And that would be absolutely vital, for example, to keep the tourists coming, to keep jet fuel at the Havana airport. So I think we're in a situation where it's a terrible set of processes that Trump has unveiled with his new national security strategy and with his Secretary of State, a very aggressive son of Cuban immigrants to the US, Marco Rubio. It's a terrible mess for the Cuban people and for their revolution.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I like that you're reminding us that Marco Rubio is the son of Cuban immigrants. I would assume he would be the son of elite immigrants, those who would have fled at the time when Castro took over. But very quickly, Professor, and I really do apologize for the fact that we have to reduce our time, but can you explain to our listeners, what do you think the end game is for the administration of Donald Trump when it comes to Cuba? What do they want to achieve?
Well, indeed, Marco Rubio's parents had even left before the revolution, but in that Miami let's say, turmoil of lots of the exile, the bourgeoisie running away after Castro came to power, there has been this brutal neoconservative ideology. And I think the end game is replacing this, let's say, Trump hemispheric, they call it a sort of corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, where the US controls. And that means that the end game isn't actually Cuba. It might be Colombia, although the leader there, Gustavo Petro, has apparently appeased Trump to some extent. It might be Panama, although the Chinese company that was running both ends of the port has been displaced, and there is a Danish company, Maersk, coming in. It might again be Greenland if indeed this hemispheric agenda continues. But I think overall, because the US is really intent on bombing Iran in the coming days, I think what we can look at is a military sort of, they call it a Department of War, no longer a Department of Defense, an attempt to distract attention from Donald Trump's domestic problems, economic, popularity, and especially the Epstein files. So I think we're going to see, including the bombing of small boats, another few people were killed in the last few days over alleged drug running using small speedboats, and plenty of other pressure points, including these sanctions. And I think we're just going to see this neoconservatism defeat the so-called paleoconservative, the more isolationist and not so oriented to war group within MAGA, the Make America Great Again. The sort of isolationist, protectionist, xenophobic style is different than the old George W. Bush neocons that would go and invade places like Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think that is the tendency that's going to be emerging, a much more belligerent U.S. military. And we have to keep an eye on it, since we've had Iran vessels here in the Simonstown and in the naval exercises with BRICS. And because China and Russia may well be drawn in. Your own article, I think, makes the case that BRICS should be more aggressive at the Sunday Tribune recently, but I'm not sure we're really going to see that, because Trump is, I'm afraid, intimidating everyone, even Narendra Modi, who's now dropping oil purchases from Russia.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting things happening in the geopolitical space. And thank you, Professor Bond, for unpacking this and explaining this very simply for our listeners. We'd love to have you back on the show again. I think there's a lot to talk about. There definitely are probably going to be more developments happening in the next couple of days. So thank you so much for bringing us into the picture.
Thanks, and good luck with all your new endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you. That was Professor Patrick Bond succinctly and brilliantly summarizing the situation as it stands between the US government and Cuba, and also giving a very, very in-depth but succinct summary on what Trump's playbook is in terms of foreign policy. So stay tuned to News and Views with Pagamile Majola on Salam Media. We have another guest lined up for you. We're going to have a quick ad break, and then we will jump straight into it.